A lone rider in black enters a town on the edge of despair. Who is he, and why does his presence spell doom for the gang that rules with an iron fist? The answer lies in a past drenched in blood and betrayal. The sun hung low over the dusty town of Red Creek, casting long shadows across the cracked wooden buildings. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of a swinging saloon sign. The townsfolk moved like ghosts, their eyes darting nervously toward the outskirts, where the notorious Blackthorn gang had made their camp. For months, the gang had terrorized Red Creek, stealing, burning, and killing without mercy. Hope was a distant memory until the stranger arrived. He rode in at dusk, a tall figure cloaked in black, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. His horse, a sleek black stallion, moved with a quiet grace that matched its rider. The townsfolk watched from behind curtained windows, whispering among themselves. Who was this man, and what did he want in a town like theirs? The stranger dismounted outside the saloon, his spurs jingling softly as he stepped inside. The bartender, a grizzled man with a permanent frown, poured him a whiskey without a word. The stranger drank in silence, his piercing eyes scanning the room. It wasn't long before the town's mayor, a nervous man with a trembling voice, approached him. "We need your help," the mayor pleaded. "The Blackthorn gang, they've taken everything from us. We can't fight them alone." The stranger set his glass down and shook his head. "I'm just passing through," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I don't get involved in other people's troubles." The mayor's shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to push a man like this. The stranger finished his drink and left the saloon, heading for the livery stable to tend to his horse. That night, as the stranger sat by a small fire outside town, a young boy approached him. The boy's face was streaked with dirt and his eyes were wide with fear. "Mister," he said, "you got to help us. The gang, they killed my PA. Their leader, he's a monster. They call him the Viper." The stranger's hand froze mid-motion, the name hitting him like a thunderclap. "The Viper," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. The boy nodded. "Yeah, that's what they call him. He's got a snake tattoo on his arm. He's the one who gives the orders." The stranger's jaw tightened, and his eyes burned with a fire that hadn't been there before. He stood abruptly, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "Tell me everything you know about him," he said. As the boy spoke, the stranger's mind raced back to a night years ago, when his life had been torn apart. He remembered the flames, the screams, and the man with the snake tattoo who had laughed as he pulled the trigger. The Viper had taken everything from him, his family, his home, his future, and now fate had brought them back together. The next morning, the stranger rode into town with a purpose. The townsfolk watched in awe as he strode into the sheriff's office, his movements deliberate and deadly. "I'll deal with the Blackthorn gang," he said, his voice cold and steady. "But this isn't for you, this is for me." The sheriff, a weary man with little left to lose, handed him a rifle. "You'll need more than that," he said. "The Viper's got a dozen men, and they're all killers." The stranger nodded. "Then it's a good thing I'm better." What followed was a showdown that would be remembered for generations. The stranger moved like a shadow, picking off the gang members one by one. He used the town's narrow alleys and abandoned buildings to his advantage, turning the gang's own tactics against them. The Viper, realizing too late that he was being hunted, tried to flee. But the stranger was waiting for him. Their final confrontation took place in the town square, under the blazing midday sun. The Viper sneered, his snake tattoo glistening with sweat. "You think you can beat me?" he taunted. "I've killed better men than you." The stranger didn't respond. He simply drew his revolver and fired, the shot echoing like a thunderclap. The Viper fell, his eyes wide with shock, and the town erupted in cheers. But the stranger didn't stay to celebrate. He mounted his horse and rode out of Red Creek, disappearing into the horizon as quietly as he had come. The townsfolk never learned his name, but they never forgot him. To them, he was a hero. To himself, he was just a man who had finally settled a score. What would you have done if you were in the stranger's shoes? Would you have walked away, or would you have faced the Viper? Share your thoughts in the comments below.